Show. I'm Angela Court McKenzie. I'm going to welcome you. I'm in Scotland, and today I'm joined by my very special guest, Rachel Shockey. She's in Nashville. Hello, Nashville. We just did a great program with Rachel on my program called The Angela Show, and I encourage you to watch it. It's our hot topic today was art and the apologetics. And the program, 28 minutes and 30 seconds goes quick. And Rachel and I just kept talking because the cameras were still on and we were just chatting. And I said, Rachel, why don't we keep this conversation going? So, hey, Rachel, how are you?
Hey, I'm excited about our conversation. We both love the arts and we've both done our research. And so our hearts are for the church and to bring the arts back into the church. I'm excited about what we're talking about.
Let's talk about that for a minute. It's funny. I did a paper and you did a paper. We discovered we both went to Biola for a master's in apologetics. Give a shout out to our alma mater. And, but you did a paper, which was not in any of the core classes. And I did a paper, which was really none of the core classes. I did one on the intersection of music and apologetics. And you did one on the intersection of art and apologetics. Talk to me why, let's keep the conversation going. Why is that a passion of yours?
Yeah. Back in 2006, I went for a study abroad program at Oxford University. And when I was there, first, I met a lot of people there on my program who had come from Christian homes, but they had a lot of doubts. Some of them were really seriously questioning Christianity. Some had already abandoned it. And a lot of the questions that they had or the objections to it were emotional reasons, but then they had piled on top of it all these intellectual reasons. And I found it really challenging to try to address every single one of the intellectual questions, but we're not getting to the core of the emotional doubt. And while I was there, I started researching the power that literature can have in helping to steer our morality, our morals, and how society often plays a part in that, and what it produces with the arts, and it can kind of guide the morals of a society. And so I really was thinking, well, music influenced me. It really drew me to the Lord. So I wonder if there are other people out there that have testimonies, conversion stories about with the arts, being a catalyst. So that's kind of what sparked all the way back in 2006, this interest in researching conversion stories and where the arts may have played a part, and what was the reason, the apologetic within the art form that kind of drew them to the truth of Christ. And what was your story?
For me, it was that my first degree is in music. I started playing piano when I was 5 because my mother made me take lessons. God bless her soul. She's like, if I ever have a daughter, she's going to play and sing for Jesus. My mother.
Thank goodness she did, because we're blessed.
Thank goodness she did. Yeah. But what's so interesting is I have a brother who's a fantastic violinist. Okay. He's super creative. And he went right kind of to the classics. He loves the classical music. I'd hear him when he was doing his violin. It was like he was learning Mendelssohn's Concerto. And I was like, stop hurting the cat. So I also, though, was, of course, learning the classical style. Okay. And it was just such a struggle for me, though I would encourage anybody who wants to do music, you need to learn your scales, all of the rudiments. It's going to make your foundation better. Very few people Jesus is going to touch in a service and you just leave playing, okay, like Beethoven. Most of us have to work it out. But anyway, about when I was like 12 or 13, even a little bit younger, maybe, we had a pastor come to the church and his wife played, and she played what they call by ear, just sat down and just would kind of play. And I'm telling you, it like awoke something in me. I was like, wait. And she would transpose, and it was just a whole different kind of music.
Yeah.
So I always loved music. I loved the Lord. But when I got to college, I got hit with some really difficult ideas and concepts and real challenges to the faith. It was like the burden of proof was always put on us that we were in the wrong. Living in a predominantly Christian West, it was like, let me tell you all the wrong things about Christianity, and a war start from religion. And I mean, I just had not seen it coming. And I went through a real period of doubt. And it was really somebody doing a Bible study on the book, Know What You Believe.
Yeah.
And when I started reading that, I had never heard of apologetics. It's definitely not a ministry of apologizing, is it? No.
Right now.
But I know. No, it's not. It's actually making a defense, but it's just a different way of kind of looking at it. So I went to school when I started in my 50s because I thought, I think I have a good grasp on music, but I don't really know a lot about defending the faith. And we also, as Christians, will have a lot of our own questions. So I finished the program. I have 1 credit left, but I just thought, what about music and the whole artists? And so that's what I loved everything I studied. And yet for my own personal bent, kind of how the Lord made me, I thought, I think there's a place, for the arts and apologetics, but I think a lot of us, we're definitely not first generation. I think Jeremy Begbie has done a lot. He's from Duke and Cambridge, and he wrote Pentecostal theology. I can't think of his name. There's so many others that I studied their research and I took it on. Bill Edgar, so many others. But I'm like, why are we not embracing?
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of a movement within the world of apologetics where people are starting to realize that we really do need the arts to help reach the heart. We've talked privately about this before, but the fact that we live in a post-truth culture where people are elevating their preferences and their feelings above the truth, that they're acknowledging, there may be truth out there. There's might be objective truth, but I care more about this because of how it makes me feel, or this is my preference. This is my truth. So how do you reach people like that who aren't even interested in your arguments, your philosophical arguments about the truth? And when you talk to people, you actually get to know them and you have conversations with them. Those intellectual doubts are real and they're valid and they should be addressed. Those are really important. But often what I have found in my experience, in my conversations with people, is that they're at the root of it all are emotional doubts. And usually it has to do with a problem of evil and suffering, something that's happened to them, to their family, something they've witnessed in the world. Sometimes it's just the suffering that's out there that they see, children dying in poor countries and, going hungry, that kind of thing, or just people being slaughtered. Why would God allow that kind of thing? And so those questions are really important. But if you're trying to reach someone who is coming from this worldview of it's my truth and, I just care about my own personal feelings, I think it's through the arts, really, reaching them at an emotional level through the heart, and being able to use it as a vehicle, using the arts as a vehicle for the truth. And I think we're starting to realize that in the apologetics community.
And I hope we do, and really just make room for it. There is, there's always going to be the verbal defense because, and the theology and the logic and reasons, because it's such a part of the way that we are. Our mind is longing to rest in truth.
Right.
But I also think it's interesting today. I was working out, which is doing a new goal for 2021. I was on the walker and I was listening to a sermon, a podcast by Martin Lloyd-Jones from, I think, Romans chapter 7, which is like 10 years ago. I didn't even know who he was. I think that's part of it, just the continual growth and learning and hearing about new people. But he did a masterful sermon on the power of sin. And that the heart outside of the moving of God is just so, he says the heart has no interest in God. We forget how strong sin is, and it's close to truth, and it wants its way, and it's naturally a rebel.
Yeah.
And as I was hearing that, I was realizing you got to have the word and spirit, I think, and you need both. Then you need the conversation, the theology, and the arts. I think they're disciplines that go very well together.
They do. And, this is what I think about the arts, at least, is that, if you're creating experiences where people can experience the heart and then have an opportunity to ask questions, that's why I think that's really important, so that we're connecting the head and the heart. And that's why, like with my exhibit, one, it's a sensory exhibit, and they're invited to really just be immersed into a moment in my story. But then also my heart for this exhibit is to always have, people on hand, Christians on hand that have a heart for evangelism, have a heart for answering, questions, whether they're emotional questions or intellectual questions, and being able to kind of address anything that might come up when they're going through this experience. A lot of the research that I have found for people who've been impacted by the arts, they're emotionally drawn in. There's something that touches their heart, and it gives them an opportunity to experience God and then to go and seek him. So I really do think that we need to be having these opportunities in churches, at our universities. And, if we want to share the gospel, we really need to be going into secular spaces too. And you and I were talking about just recently before we got on the air about how, the arts are like amazing, at Disney or in other places like that, but the Christians have kind of lost that.
Passion for promoting the arts.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's part of it. And I just want to encourage every pastor, trust me, God's probably put someone within your congregation that's been annoying you, the artsy person. and they're like, well, I got creative ideas and we should do this. And I know it's not fundamentally part of the Sunday morning service, which is fine and understandable. That's a gathering of the saints and the sense of community and things. But I would really hope that churches and pastors would recognize the artist within the congregation as part of the giftings of God, along with teachers and along with pastoral positions and counseling, that it's part of the expression of God, and it's for us. It's like, that's what I was saying to you before. It's like so many in the church pushed the arts, drama, music, there's like money for everything except sometimes art outreaches. And we pushed it to Broadway, and we pushed it out to the theme parks. And the best artists in the community are working for the theme parks. The best artists in the community are on Broadway, or they're in the Civic Theater. And I'm like, wait, our God made anything that's good came from God. Anything that's good, all good gifts come from God. So not to make anyone feel bad, but I don't mind saying, let's raise the awareness. That budget needs to be done. We need to reclaim what is our God. This is part of God.
We were created to create. We are made in the image of God. We have been given one of his attributes, which is we can't create something from nothing, obviously. God is the only one that can actually create something, like that. But we're intended to create, he gave us an imagination. He gave directives on how to design the tabernacle and the robes of the priests, these beautiful things and some of which, like the robes of the priests, the pomegranates, in 3 different colors. Well, there aren't 3 different colors of pomegranates. So, imaginative things as well. God's used Chronicles of Narnia when I was younger to really baptize my mind and prepare it for the gospel. God can use really anything. And it would be amazing to see churches create opportunities, throughout the week, not just on Sunday morning, but throughout the week, and then special events where they can encourage artists. I don't know about you, Angela, but especially it sounds like you were encouraged with music. But when I was growing up in the church, I didn't always get a lot of encouragement from people at the church with regard to my art. My family was, encouraging to me. But at the church, it was kind of like, well, what can God do with that? And it had more to do with like, well, you're not going to make any money from that. It's like, that's not what it's about. It's about, worshiping the Lord through what I create and honoring him.
Excuse me though. Is this why the Picasso, I was on Sotheby's auction site, is this like one of the Picassos or Rembrandts are going for 50 million and up? Because no artist ever makes money. Of course, sometimes it's after they die. So we don't want to go there.
Yeah.
But first, and some of the most wealthy people in our communities, in like top 500, you can see artists are now starting to go up. So for someone to say there's no music, there's no financial, there is. I mean, not everyone's going to hit that level, of course. Most of us won't. I won't. But it's not even the issue anymore. The issue is that you got to live with a sense of urgency. We don't know how many days God's going to give us, but if he's given you art, music, drama, dance, we are asking leadership to really make room for it. Make room, help them raise money and put on these and really elevate the arts.
Yeah. I mentioned this in a conversation I had with a friend of mine a few months back, but there's a show called The Chosen, which some of your listeners may be familiar with. And I don't know if you've watched it yet, but if you haven't, I encourage you to watch it because it's beautifully done. Talking about, how people were transformed by meeting Jesus and knowing him. And but one of the things I loved about that show was that they took apart, they didn't have to do this, but they took almost one episode showing Jesus doing carpentry because he was a carpenter. And carpenters don't just do things that are like practical, like, making a door handle or, a table or whatever, but they create beautiful things too. They put designs in them. So Jesus, he was involved in the arts, and he used parables, which is an art form. He used parables to help get to the heart, to convey truth. So I just, I hope that we can, just through our conversation, even can encourage people in the church, like you said, to support the artists that are there at their church.
Yeah. And listen, and a lot of them are. I'm very pro local church. My husband and I belong to a local church. We support it and do everything we can. I'm talking more of just there is something that there is a struggle because part of the Reformation, even though Luther was supportive of it, other church fathers in the last 500 years they've seen it completely subjective. Matter of fact, I don't have a copy of my paper, but if anyone's interested, I'll share it with you, or I might somehow publish it. But, part of it was discovering that one of the more that the church was trying to respond to the Enlightenment and then respond to the 19th century, critical take on the scriptures, that so much of just defending the faith was against these very un-Christian-like philosophies. Well, that's tit for tat, that's word for word. And the arts, it was like, you don't need to know as much about the arts as you need to know about the study of a particular discipline that has to do with doctrine. And it was almost like the arts they were pushed out of a place of importance for survival because they were, dealing with, and I get it. Trust me, I get it. The more I study it, and sometimes you just have to fight the giant in front of you. Not everybody had to fight Goliath. That was David's giant. So I get the history of it. And I would say thank you for all of you who have gone before us in apologetics, especially. But are we missing something for this generation? I'm missing an opportunity if we don't really go back and say, guys, where do we put the arts in? Where do we say, and not just as an expression, but I want you to talk for a minute before we go about the arts and they bring knowledge. Now that's a critical place right there. How do you describe it? How do you defend that thought?
Yeah, earlier we were touching on that, and I was mentioning to you on off camera how important that discussion is because we have a lot of people, within the apologetics world who haven't quite grasped the value of art and that it can convey knowledge. And so I think that's an important discussion to have because a lot of times they think that art is just subjective, that it can't really provide any objective knowledge. And obviously there's subjective preference, like what art we like and don't like, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking about like when I look at a piece of art or I go to see a play or I hear music, can I actually gain knowledge from it? And just in the way that we do in the sciences, that's how we test things. We test things out and check it with reality. It's the same thing with art. So I think it has more to do with the person that's approaching the art and how we're looking to see if there's any knowledge that can be gained from it. Because obviously, trying to determine if we can get knowledge from any kind of art is kind of fruitless. There's some strands that don't lead to truth, right? Like I've got a cup here, I've got a mug. I'm not going to gain much knowledge from this. There's not much intentionality here for that. But, we do have artists who are putting forth philosophy. It bubbles up in their work. I love C.S. Lewis saying that. He says, you can't help but let it bubble up in your art form because it's important to you, your philosophy, your worldview. So I was going to say, I've got my paper here, and there's a quote that I love, and it's by a guy, Gene Bender. And let's see, let me find that here for you. I'm not talking about that. All right. So, and it's in Contemporary Philosophy of Art. That's the book, John Bender. And he talks about how that when we enter into the world or situation that art can create, that we can acquire a hypothesis, and be presented with a certain possibility about which we may come to know how things would be if the hypothesis were true. And this would be considered conceptual knowledge, conceiving something. And then he said, further, what we learn from these fictional worlds have real world implications. Some examples of skills we can learn from novels, for instance, could be strategy, perception of environments, and empathy. We can get this from other art forms as well. And so he was saying that it would seem that readers acquire factual beliefs and propositional knowledge from fiction in the way that scientists gather knowledge from the fabric, or about the fabric of the universe. So just the same exact way, we're testing things out when we look at things. Just like in my example earlier with Peter Hitchens, he is standing in front of this painting and he's testing out his own knowledge of what he knows about himself and about his friends and the world. And so I think this is a really important discussion that we should be having in the church, and more research needs to be done in this area on the philosophy of art. And because really it's always just kind of been a discussion on objective beauty, which I think is important and to defend. But, man, we've been talking about this for, decades, talking about objective beauty. But I think if we can help people to understand that you can actually gain truth and knowledge from the arts, we would start to use it more, I think, within our evangelistic endeavors.
Yeah, I absolutely believe in the that there is an objective nature in beauty, truth, and goodness. And sometimes I think we have confused the difference between objective beauty and preference, personal preference or taste. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But I've never seen someone who wants to pay top dollar to build a home in a garbage site. There is something about that is not welcoming. When they look at this garbage site, those lots are not going up. But if you get a piece of land, if you could have the pleasure, the privilege to own a piece of land with waterfront or on the riverfront or in front of the ocean, and every day you go out and you look at the beauty of the ocean, the symmetry of the waves and the crashing, there's something about that beautiful, clean, gorgeous look versus a garbage site. I mean, I think that's a simple, analogy that there is something there, that the human is longing for a world in which all things are made right. And I'm a person who loves contemporary art. Most of the art in our home is contemporary. And some people would look at it and just go, that's just splashes of color. But to me, that's an expression. I mean, I also love Victorian. I love traditional. I love, I don't like some of the harshness of some of the modern art, but I love the modern art. At the same time, I just think there's a beauty and a symmetry. But as you said, and a lot of art, it's the philosophy. And that was something that helped me, was some of the art that came out, especially in Europe after World War II and the concentration camps and the horror of Hitler. You could even see it in people's paintings, especially some of the Jewish artists. It was just gray and bleak. That was real. I mean, that lifted, shared a truth that what happened was awful. There's no, you don't have to have a personal view about that. It is awful. It's a fundamental human right to live.
Yeah. And I was going to say something you said reminded me that, I want to make sure people understand that it's not just art that's produced by Christians that God can use. He can use art that's not produced by Christians, because the same thing, when you approach any kind of art, any book, any play, you name it, whether it's produced by a Christian or not, you're going to assess it for its truth. And so you can stand in front of a piece and say, well, is what I'm seeing, is this true? Does this make sense with reality? So you can stand in front of a piece and reject it. It can still teach you something about the world, about reality, and give you knowledge. So, I would say, try try not to putting up too much of a distinction between the secular and the sacred here. You know what I mean? As far as being able to use God, being able to use any kind of art for a catalyst. Now, obviously, I'm not like promoting morally bad art, right? You know, not promoting that. Yeah.
No, I mean, of course. I mean, but again, if that kind of art is produced, it's the philosophy of the individual that's being exposed. So I read a quote one time that Madonna made about, you know, some of the acts she does on stage. It's not just music. She said, if you just keep doing it and keep doing it, they might be reviled at first, but then their interest will be piqued. And maybe after a while, it won't be so disturbing. So I realized she's trying to get across a worldview. She is promoting a particular way to interpret what is right and wrong and what is good and bad and she's using the knowledge that comes through the experience, through the eyes and ears and feeling and the beat and the message and all of that. And so I think Rachel and I are just wanting to celebrate the artists who are watching and encourage the powers that be and academics in pastoral ministries and, you know, evangelism ministries. Bring and elevate the gifts that God's given us. Let's not make it just a sideline, but, you know, Lord, show us a grander picture of the kingdom of God. And how do you want to use all the gifts you've given us?
Love it. Thanks, Angela.
Yeah. Any last words? Oh, you got to show us though. You got to show us your jacket. You were showing me that earlier that you made it. Please do it.
So, now I got to say, I will, but I didn't make this. I helped a little bit. My wonderful mother-in-law, Rachel Shockey, made this. Come on,
Sharon.
Jacket.
Karen, look at this, folks.
Cute little jacket.
Beautiful?
And it's got like the little pleats in the back, and I haven't worn this in a year because, you know, I haven't had an opportunity with COVID. So yeah, my wonderful mother-in-law made this for me. And like right before we moved back to Tennessee. So she's like, I take this project with you and then you leave, you know, but she's a beautiful seamstress. Love it.
Yeah. It's lovely brocade fabric. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Rachel, thanks for staying on. Thanks everybody for joining us on the After the Show. We love you. And come on, artists, keep producing for the glory of God. Bye, everybody.